Okay, welcome back everybody to class number 20 in Sefer Shemot. And we're in the middle of the Mishkan unit. And I'm going to share my source sheet and we'll get started. And no, I didn't do that right. Share screen and source sheet. Here we go. Okay, class number 20. And the Mishkan house for God or model home for us. Today we'll see how the model home idea begins. And our question topic today is who or what needs atonement and why? And the topic is the Mishkan and the concept of kapara. Now, kapara, it's again, kapara is a famous topic, and the main goal to share today is to understand what the biblical concept of kapara is and how it relates to the Mishkan. And it'll be two different directions we can go in, and I'll try to explain both of them, and then we'll try to take sides. So, okay, so last week what we did, we went through this long dibur that started in chapter 25, Parshat Truma, and all Parshat Tetzaveh, well-known dibur. God speaks to Moshe once, and that goes all the way to the middle of chapter 30. And what we ended last year with, and so I'll show the table in a minute, it was very structured, the Mishkan, starting with the Kodesh Kodeshim and the Aron, and then going outwards, and the structure was very organized, structured unit. And it was enveloped by this concept of Shekhinah, Vasud Mitash V'Shachanti, as we'll point out again. And at the very end of this unit, at the end of the Dibur, as almost like a leftover, we have the laws of the Mizbach Torah, and we just pointed that out last week and said there must be something special about it. And today we said we'll continue that idea this week. Okay, so just a quick review. We had the opening line in chapter 25. You should make for me a mikdash, and I'll dwell there. Of course, the question we discussed is, does God need a place to dwell, or do we need a place representing the fact that he dwells in our midst and we serve him as a nation? We'll discuss that when we get towards the end of this whole unit. And then inside this unit, in chapter 25, we have the vessels in the Kodesh Kodeshim. I'll make it bigger for a second so we see it. That was the Aron and the Kaporet. And God spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu from the Kaporet. Then the vessels in the Kodesh and the main sanctuary, the Shulchan and the Menorah. And of course, the Mizbach Torah was missing. Then we had the tent, the structure that houses the vessels. And we had the cover, the Uriot, the Krashim holding it up, and the Prochet dividing between the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodeshim. Then we have the outer courtyard, the Chatzer, with the Mizbeach in the middle, where we offer sacrifices. And everything in the outside is going to be copper. And then the fence around it, or the Mechitzah that surrounds the entire area, the poles and the curtains that connected between the poles that made the Chatzer. Then we mentioned the oil for the menorah, the big day kuhuna, the 7-day inauguration ceremony, and the daily olat tamid. And then we ended last year with, after the olat tamid, which followed the 7-day inauguration ceremony, we had these beautiful summary psukim. We said olat tamid l'dorotechem, this daily korban olah for God for all generations, brought at the entrance to the tent of meeting in front of God. So this, we show our connection to God by bringing this daily korban, the olat tamid, and God dwells in the Kodesh Kodeshim, and we're going to meet in this tent, the place where I'm going to meet you to speak to you. We'll continue communication between God and his people. And God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to meet you there. I'm not going to meet you there. I'm going to meet the nation of Israel there. And therefore, it will become Kadosh with God's glory, the Kavod, and we'll see that idea connecting it to Har Sinai. And then we summarize, God will sanctify the Oel Moed, that was chapter 25 and 26. The Mizbeach was chapter 27. Aaron and his sons was chapter 28 and 29 with the anointing ceremony. And then we concluded with V'shachanti b'toch b'nei Yisrael v'iti lem Elohim. That's where we ended last week's share. And just to make it nice and small now, just to show you the unit, we begin with, where's my little share screen? Here we are. Ooh,
Menachem, excuse me
yeah.
for a minute. Can you click X out all tools on the left-hand side? If you just X that out, it makes the rest of the screen bigger.
Okay, we'll do that in a second. I just wanted to do one second. Here we go. Here. Va'asudi midash v'shachanti. V'shachanti. You got that? I'm just showing you the unit. That's why I made it nice and small, to show how the opening line with the closing line, and the phrase Vayiti Lechem Elohim. That's Brit Milah and Brit Sinai. We'll go back to that later on, probably next week's share when we connect this to Har Sinai. And then now I can close the drawings and stuff and go back to this. And now we're going to make it bigger again. Okay, now we should see everything. And then they'll know that I'm God. That sounds like the Ten Commandments. "Hinei Hashem Elokechem," who took you out of Egypt. And the goal, I took you out of Egypt to dwell among you. I am Hashem, your boss. I'm Hashem who entered a covenant with you at Har Sinai. And therefore, the Mishkan is going to be a reminder of what happened at Har Sinai and our covenantal commitment to be God's people. Now, I'm just reviewing my key point I try to make is that if the goal of Chumash is God entering an eternal covenant with the people that's going to serve him forever, I need a reminder of that covenantal commitment. And therefore, on the national level, God has a house or a what we call here a Mishkan or a Mikdash where his glory, his kavod will be present. We go to visit him there, but the purpose of that visit, we're not going as consumers, we're going there as employees. Because we're going to meet God to remember our connection to God, our commitment to be his people, and we go there to learn, to remember, to study how to become God's people, to remind yourself of that relationship, to relive the Har Sinai experience. And we make the main point I tried to make last week was that if that was the goal of the Mishkan, and when we don't have a Mishkan or don't have a Mikdash, that goal can be replaced by a Beit Knesset. So when we go to visit God, we go to the shul. If a shul is a Mikdash Ma'at, then the take-home message is when you go to the Beit Knesset, you're not going as a consumer, you're going as an employee to remember your relationship with God and your commitment. And there you go there not just to remember your commitment, but to learn and improve on your behavior, to study Torah, ask questions, form committees, take action, build a community. Now, this whole unit ended um, with this beautiful conclusion, but in the same dibur we had the laws of the Mizbach Torah, which didn't make any sense. Why is the Mizbach Torah, which is located, it should be located here in the Kodesh with the Shulchan and Menorah, as we'll see later on. Why is it only recorded at the end? That's the obvious question. And to prove it's made out of Zahav, it's a Mizbech Miktar Toret, and we cover it with gold, etc. And then we made a big deal about these final psukim. Where do we place it? We place it Lifnei Parochet, in front of the Parochet, which divides between the Kodesh and Kodeshim, which is covering the Aron Haidut, in front of the Kaporet. Now notice the words Kaporet and Parochet are the same letters, because they serve the similar function. Again, both are Sher al Haidut, where I'm going to meet you there. So therefore, the Mizbach Torah has something to do with this connection between the Jewish people and God speaking to them from the Aron Haidut. If the Aron Haidut is where God's going to meet the Jewish people, and that's going to be the symbol of our covenant, or the testimony of the covenant, therefore there has to be some deep connection between the Mizbach Torah and that purpose. Now, when do we bring the Korban Tamid? Aaron brings on this Ktoret Samim, this incense, every day once a day in the morning when he cleans the menorah. And when Aaron goes in to light the menorah in the evening, he brings Torah again. And therefore, the point we made was it seems like in order to light the menorah, I need to bring Torah. I'm not going in just to bring Torah for itself. It seems like from these psukim that in order to enter on a daily basis, you need to bring Torah to enter. I'll try to prove that later in today's shir. Then there's a statement: don't bring it. Only bring Torah. What's commanded, don't do something that's not commanded. We know what happened to Nadav and Avihu. Okay? And we have once a year, and now we have the concept of kapara for the first time. Unlike any other kli that we've mentioned till now, this specific vessel needs a once a year cleansing. The chiper aron al karnotav achap hashana. That was, we didn't see this by the menorah, by the shulchan, by the aron itself, or by the mizbach hachitzon. Of all the kelim, the mizbach Torah is unique. A, because its avodah is linked to the avodah of the menorah. But the main difference is this kli is not only outside the unit of the what's called the Shechina unit, it requires kapara once a year. It doesn't say what day, but obviously it's going to be Yom Kippur because this is Midam Chatat Kippurim. Now, why does it mention Yom Kippur? We'll have to discuss that when we talk about when these laws were given, before or after Chet Egel. That'll be really complicated. The main thing I want to point out today is there's a concept of kapara. I'm not translating on purpose. That relates to this Mizbach Torah. And this Mizbach Torah needs a once a year atonement or kapara. why it's called Kodesh Kodeshim. Hopefully, I have time to dedicate a shir to what the word Kodesh Kodeshim means, because it's mentioned over and over again. Now, so what was our conclusions? There's a summary now. We're going to start our main shir today. Mizbach Torah itself is outside the Shechina unit, but inside the Dibor. That was the main point I tried to make before, and now we can make more room and close it. Okay, but it's inside the Dibor. It's directly connected to Kohen lighting the menorah. We talked about that. It's placed, we'll see, I'll give you a diagram, on the axis between the Mizbach HaChitzon, the outside altar, and the Kaporet. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see how important that'll be. And it requires once a year kapara. Now, I just want to show you the wordplay between parochet and kaporet. I just did a little thing here with a little color. I just going back to the pasuk we mentioned before. V'natato to pasuk vav earlier. Where do we put it? Lifnei parochet asher aron haidut. Lifnei kaporet asher haidut asher v'dach hashama. Okay. Now again, the word parochet and kaporet are the same letters and the same idea. Now, anyone know what the parochet and kaporet share in common? There's something they share.
Kruvim.
Yeah. There's on the parochet. There's kruvim embroidered on them. I'll show you that in a minute. And the kaporet has kruvim on top of it. In fact, let's take a quick look at it to stop the share just to show you this. Share an open chumash. Oh, is my chumash open? That's a good question. Okay, yeah, here we go. We need Shemot. We need Shemot. Okay, if I go back to chapter 25 in Shemot, the first commandment is to make the Aron, and then we make a kaporet. Got it? On top. Vasita kaporet zahav tahor, and vasita shnaim kruvim zahav nikshat tesotam. Two kruvim made out of zahav on the kaporet, on both ends of the kaporet.
Mm-hmm.
So the kaporet have kruvim, and one kruv on one end, one kruv on the other end, and the kruvim are facing each other, etc. And then you put the kaporet, remember, as the lid or the cover of the Aron, and inside you put the edut. And then again, I'm going to meet, God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to meet you there. I'm going to speak to you from on top of the kaporet between the two kruvim, everything which I'm going to command Bnei Yisrael. So Matan Torah is not over yet. It's going to continue from the Kodesh Kodeshim. And therefore, this is one of the strongest proofs that the Mishkan, its function relates to Mamad Har Sinai, because at Mamad Har Sinai we received the 10 statements and Parshat Mishpatim. But the continuation of Matan Torah, if there's more laws that God wants to command us, we'll have them no longer from Har Sinai, but from the Mishkan, and therefore the Mishkan will be a portable Har Sinai. We'll try to prove that as we go along. Now, then we have the Shulchan and the Menorah, again made out of Zahav, and then in chapter 26, when we have the curtain, the
Carps.
coverings, the carpet, and not carpets, the blankets that cover the Mishkan, and then the krashim, they'll hold it up. We get to the parochet here. Vasita parochet, tchelet vargaman tolat shari v'sheish bazar, maseh choshev yasotam kruvim. It's embroidered with kruvim. So the parochet and the kaporet both have kruvim. Got that? And it's not by chance they're the same letters. It's like wordplay between them. And they both protect the Aron Haidut. That should be crystal clear. Now, if I want to go and try to understand what's the meaning of the Ktoret, which is placed lifnei Haidut, lifnei Parochet, and lifnei in front of the Kruvim, as we'll see, there's got to be some deep connection between these Kruvim on the Parochet and the Kaporet and what's happening inside the Kodesh Kodeshim. We're not saying what it is yet, but it has to be. Now, so therefore, in light of that, I want to go back to the.
Is this the only mention of Kruvim except for Gan Eden?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're mentioned in Gan Eden, and then now they're here. I don't think there are any. I mean, later you have them in Yechezkel, I think. There's a Kruv here that in his vision of the Maaseh Merkavah, but the Kruvim are always relate to God's presence. Now, what's their job in Gan Eden? We'll talk about that soon. Now, if Kruvim relate to Kapara, we'll see. So the Kaporet obviously relates to the Kruvim. To get a better idea what's the purpose of the Kaporet and the Parochet, and hence the Mizbach HaKtoret, it all has to relate back to the Kruvim. Just from again, I'm not saying what the connection is, but they have to be connected. That's all.
There's no Kruvim before the original sin.
There's no Kruvim where?
Before the Chet Adam.
Um, okay. The question was there ever that question? What happened first was did Chumash come before? Was Chumash given before creation? That goes back to that's what Chazal claimed. But we'll get to that soon, not soon, but we'll get to that topic in a minute. Now back to So again, I just want to show you why I made a big deal about the if again the goal today is to understand what's the purpose of Mizbach Torah and why is it outside the Shechina unit. So I made it deal. It's placed lifnei parochet asher vonedut lifnei kaporet, and both the parochet and kaporet have kruvim. Now in the Mikdash, there's what's called avodat tamid, daily rituals in the Mishkan. Who named them for me? What are the things that are done tamid?
The
I'll stop
Ola,
the share for a minute. Give
the
me
Ola,
examples of things. What?
the
There's the
Ola,
Olat Tamid done where?
and lighting the menorah. Well, taking care of the menorah in
No,
one
before no, the Olat Tamid.
Ola Tamid, the
Okay,
Ketubah.
is the Korban Tamid, which is coming up in chapter 29. Okay, now is there any Avodat Tamid on the? We'll go through all the vessels.
Oh,
Does the Mizbech? Yeah. How about inside the Kodesh? Does the Shulchan have an Avodat Tamid?
no.
Not a daily one. They have a weekly one.
Okay.
Remember, the Shulchan has once a week. We switch the bread. Okay, that's going to be. We're going to find out about that only in there'll be lechem the fanai tamid. The lechem is called tamid, but it's always in front of God. But it's only switched once a week. In the Kodesh, up until now, the only avodah we have in the Kodesh is the menorah on a daily basis. Now, if we're lighting the menorah is the main avodah every day in baboker, and then when we get to Mizbach Torah, we're told when Aaron goes in to light the menorah, you're being thrown. Now, if you're learning a sugya, what happens if there's a mikdash that doesn't have a menorah and only has a Mizbach Torah? Would you think? Now, what the Gemara does talk about, let's say there's no Mizbach Torah and you have a menorah, what would you do? You bring Torah anyhow. The Gemara tells us that's a discussion. If there's no Mizbach Torah, you just bring Torah without the Mizbech.
You go to war with Yahweh.
You don't need the Mizbech, you don't need the Mizbach Torah to bring Torah. Now, I want to guess something. There's two things the Torah does. Tell me what when you light the Torah, what does it do?
It makes a cloud.
It makes that. And what else does it do?
Creates a smell.
It
No.
makes a smell. Now, the question is, it makes a scent. Okay, smell. I think the word scent is better than smell,
Yes.
Yeah.
but smell doesn't smell so good. But
Sure.
scent's nice. Okay. Now, scent,
Although it
calling it
is a-
scent makes more sense.
Something which gives it which has a bad smell.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Torah.
There's rech. There's yeah. What we call now. Does it make a rech nichoach?
No, that's just
I don't think that it doesn't say it's a rech nichoach. We'll get
No.
rech nichoach later.
that's just for the
Yeah.
Isha.
So the question is going to be, what's the function of the Torah? Now, in other religions, you check on Wikipedia and stuff like that, they tell you that incense burning was very common in all ancient rituals and all, Avodah Zarah thing. So is this just we're copying, what everyone else is doing, like people like to say? Or is a Torah in our Mikdash have a unique purpose? In other words, is it like every other temple that has altars and has, symbols of God and 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 different types of worship? Or does the Torah in our Mikdash have a special, unique function that relates to its essence? That's the thing. Now, and therefore, I want to go more with the Anan, even though it doesn't say Anan here. The word Anan is missing. So that goes, but it doesn't say Reach either. It doesn't give any purpose it doesn't give a purpose. That's something you have to do in order to go in. Now, the direction I want to go in is it's something that needs to be done in order to enter. And that's to be the question. If we're going to meet God, the core question is going to be, this encounter with God, does it need to be buffered? I'm hoping I'm using the word buffer correctly. Is it possible just to meet God directly, or do I need a buffer? Now, who remembers when that topic came up big time in Chumash? Like, what if the Mikdash is a mini Har Sinai? Then Har Sinai was an encounter. But if you remember chapter 19, in chapter 20, in chapter 24, the encounter with God is really complicated. How close were we supposed to go up the mountain? Do we have to keep our distance? It goes back and forth all the time. The 70s Kenim go up and they see God and they bow down from a distance. But was it the right thing to do or wrong thing to do? Later in that review, get too close to God, it's not good for them. God warns them before the Ten Commandments, keep your distance, stay back. But the encounter with God is complicated. But one of the key things we have in the encounter with God, the idea of we have an Anan in Har Sinai. We'll go back to that in chapter 19. And we'll see later we'll have an Anan in Yom Kippur. So I want to go in the direction that the purpose of the Mizbach Torah is to create the Anan. And then we have a massive machloket between tons of commentators. Is the Anan that's created by the Mizbach Torah, is it protecting us from the encounter? Is it a buffer? Or is it representing God? Does the Anan represent the Shekhinah? Some of my colleagues are sure of that, and I always argue with them. My claim is that it's a buffer, protect. I'll try to explain why I'm saying the word protection later on, but we need a buffered encounter, and I want to try and prove that. I'll start the proof this week. But the big question that's going to really complicate things is the buffered encounter inherent to the Har Sinai experience, or is it a result of Chet HaEgel? You understand? Got my question?
Wow.
We're going to need a buffered encounter. How much is this buffered encounter a result? This concept of kapara, the need for kapara in the Mikdash, how much is a part of God's original plan, and how much is it a result of Chet HaEgel? Do you understand? I'm not going to solve that problem yet, but it'll be a really key discussion because it's going to be affected by when the commandment to build the Mishkan was given, before or after Chet HaEgel. But there's no doubt Chumash talks about these concepts before it tells you the story of Chet HaEgel. Therefore, it can't say to bring the Mizbach, to do kapara on the Mizbach Torah every year on Yom Kippur, because I don't know what Yom Kippur is yet, because Yom Kippur relates to Chet HaEgel. But on the other end, would I have needed kapara on the Mizbach Torah had it not been for Chet HaEgel? Got it? And we'll have to discuss that. Okay. So we'll keep that in mind. Again, I'm just setting the stage. Therefore, Mizbach Torah could either because of the sentiment. When you look on Wikipedia, what's the or any kind of even academic sources, most people say the Mizbach Torah is making ascent, and it's a classic ritual, and very few go in the idea of a buffered encounter. Until you look carefully, then you see the buffered encounter is more in Jewish commentary, less so in academic commentary. Now I want to try and prove why the Anan goes back to Har Sinai. So let's go back to our source sheet and we'll get to work. Okay, so we talked about the daily function of the Mishkan. Now I want to discuss. I have this nice little drawing here of the parallel to Har Sinai. I hope it's okay here. Make this a bit smaller. Okay, I have a little drawing here on the left of Har Sinai. I can use my little toy marker here. Okay, make a little line. Okay. So at Har Sinai, as you remember, there's what's called Tachtit Har, the bottom of the mountain over here, where the people were standing. I should have drawn little people here. Here we go. I'll tell you a little family story here. So I made this drawing on purpose. But so my daughter, when she was like 6 or 7 years old, was drawing Har Sinai, and she had like people like that. And then some of the people were like this. Okay. So I asked her, how come some people are lying down and some people are standing up? She said, those are people who touched the mountain. She was so, yeah. So she caught on to, it was so thinking, you can't go to the mountain, you can't touch it. So I just want to share with you a little family story. Now, so again, remember the Tachtit Har is the Mizbeach, where the nation stands. The Kohanim and the 70 elders are allowed to go closer, remember? HaKohanim HaNikashim El Hashem. And Moshe, or might be Moshe and Aaron, go up to the top, Rosh Har on the top of the mountain. And then there's Kohanim. I'll read the psukim about these in a minute. If I take that parallel, if the Kodesh Kodeshim, where the Aron is, where the Luchot are, is the Kodesh Kodeshim, that's pretty easy to make that thing. And if there's a Mizbeach in the Chatzer, where everyone brings the Olat Tamid, remember in Har Sinai we have Olot and Shlamim, then it makes a lot of sense that the Ohel Moed is going to be like the mountain itself. And what do we have? Just like in Har Sinai, I'll go down one. The Mizbach Torah is on this axis right here. Actually, I have a better drawing coming up. Let me just clear all this stuff. And let's go farther down. Next drawing, here we go. On Har Sinai, remember we have the Anan. See a little picture there? That's cute. And now make it a little bigger. And on this axis between these Becha Chitzom, we have the Olat Tamid thing. So the Fneap, this is the Parochet. Let me draw this better. Bum bum. Okay, this is the Parochet over here that has Kruvim on it. There's Kruvim on top of the Aron over here. And here, this is going to make an Anan. Okay, draw the Anan. So this pick like this picture over here. Got it? That's going to make the Anan. So it could be the Anan now is representing Har Sinai. Now, if I take the parallel to Har Sinai, remember God's original plan was making that Moshe was going to be, God was going to speak to Moshe in the thickness of a cloud. I'm going to go back to speaking in a minute. People said we want to see God directly. We'll go back to what we called back then plan A and plan B. So it could be that what I want to suggest now in a minute is the Shekhinah unit is going to represent the ideal encounter that doesn't require a buffer. And the Mizbach Torah is going to represent the realistic encounter with God, which was the end result of Har Sinai, or basically what we call way back plan A and plan B. I'll go explain this again in a minute. Now, I'm going to share my screen now and I need to share my screen now in 1 second. Okay. Yeah, so we'll clean these up. Okay. So this cloud Anan, which created, we talked about as a sweet smell or a form of, my mistake. It should be sent over here. I made the same mistake. I should have wrote sent. I cut by my own commentary. And we'll go to the Avodah Yom Kippur in a minute. What I should have put here on the source sheet, my mistake, but hopefully you remember these psukim. Let's go back to chapter 19 of Har Sinai to remember where the parallel is coming from. So again, let's open up Sefer Shemot, Exodus chapter 19. And basically, the big event, remember? God tells Moshe, go make the following proposition to the people of Israel. Look what I did for you. I took you out of Egypt. I brought you here. And now, Vata, im Shemot yishmu b'koli, will you obey me? Will you keep my brit? It's going to be Brit Sinai. You'll be my special nation, my treasured nation, even though I'm the God of all the land. And you'll be for me a mamlechet koni v'goy kadosh, a nation separated in the service of God. And then we said yes to this, and then comes the Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and I'm the God who took you out of Egypt to become your boss and to enter this relationship. Now that we accepted the proposition, and God wants now to declare his 10 statements, God's original plan was Pasuk Tet, Vayomar Hashem Moshe, Hinei ono lecha ba'ilecha ba'ad ha'anan. Okay, I'm going to come and meet you, Moshe, in the thickness of a cloud. Here we have the Anan in Har Sinai for the first time. Why? In order that the people overhear me speaking to you, and then when you come and say, here's what God said, they'll believe in you forever, not believe in you, but believe that what you're saying in God's name is what God said. That big principle of faith. And Moshe tells this plan to the people, okay? It's the other way around. Moshe told God what the people said, and what was missing here at 9 3/4 was what the people said. And Rashi points out the people must have said, we want a direct encounter, because God tells Moshe, get the people ready, for today and tomorrow. Be ready for day 3, because on day 3, Yered Hashem le'nei kol ha'Har Sinai, God will come, and in the eyes of the people, this represents what we call a non-buffered encounter. So if I follow Chazal, Rashi, almost all the Parshim go in this direction. God's original plan was a buffered encounter, which is realistic. The people, we want the real thing. Remember, we want to see our king. They want the direct encounter. God says, you want a direct encounter, you need preparation. Remember this idea of preparation, get ready for 3 days, etc. Don't come near, etc. And they get everything ready, and it comes on day 3, and everyone chickens out, remember? And Moshe brings them back to the mountain. Okay? And then Har Sinai, Ashan Kulo, full of smoke again. Maybe that's the Anan. Because God came down in fire, and the fire goes up again, unclear what's happening. There's a Kol Gadol, etc. And Moshe speaks, and God answers, and Chazal say this is the last 8, but they heard the first 2 directly from God. But the 3 groups that we have in the Mishkan, we have here. God comes down on Har Sinai, to the top of the mountain, that's Rosh Har, calls Moshe to the Rosh Har, and Moshe goes up, and that's the Kodesh Kodeshim, Moshe with God. And God tells Moshe, Raid ha'id b'ham, go warn the people, because they might come up, right? to see, and they'll die. And then the gamma kohanim and gishim el shemitkadashu. Even the kohanim come closer to God, they be careful, lest they become hit by God. Moshe says it'll be okay, and God says no. Go down, and you come up only with Aaron. And the kohanim and the am can't come up the mountain because they might die if they get too close. Okay, so Moshe goes and warns them, and then God speaks the 10 statements. Again, who does God say them directly or through a buffer? That was a whole discussion, what we call plan A and plan B. It was God's original plan. Was a buffered encounter. The people asked for a direct encounter. What actually happened was totally unclear. Because one was ideal, one was realistic, and that was our whole discussion. So what I want to claim is that if I look at this unit, remember the Shekhinah unit? The Shekhinah unit possibly represents a more direct encounter. And now that the Shekhinah unit is over, now I say I need a Mishpach Torah because I need a buffered encounter. So if I go back to the Shekhinah unit represents the ideal encounter, and the Mishpach Torah makes it realistic. I'm going to give you a better analogy. I think this works better. If you're building, let's say you're building a school building, okay? I need classrooms. What do I need in the classroom? I need a table, a chair, lights, a board, whatever, a computer screen. I need those for the function of the classroom. But in the classroom, I also have a fire extinguisher, or I have those little things in the ceiling in case of fire. Otherwise, you can't get the building insured. Now, when you build the structure, the contractor who builds it couldn't care less, as far as he's concerned. The sprinkling system and the chairs and the walls is the same. It's all the same because he's building it. But as far as the function of the building, I'm not making a building to install a sprinkling system. Okay? I'm making a building to have a classroom. But part of the class, in order for the needs of the classroom, there's a building code. In case of a fire, I need a sprinkler. Got it? So I don't need a mikdash to bring Torah. Right? I need a mikdash to bring an olah tamid, to meet God, to light the menorah. But because we're encountering God, I need protection. That's my key idea I want to get across. In other words, I want to differentiate between things that are the direct function, the direct purpose of the mikdash, which is Birkat Kohanim, teaching Torah, B'Samut Shmiya B'nai Yisrael, and showing off the bread, Seder, our Olat Tamid, representing our dedication to God, the Aron in the middle. But I'm saying the function of Mishpach Torah, this idea of kapara, is secondary only because the Shekhinah is there. So first I have a Shekhinah unit. Now that I have a Shekhinah unit, I need protection from the Shekhinah. Now to support this, I want to follow what follows in the next chapter, or the rest of chapter 30 and chapter 31, and how they relate to a very similar idea. So let's go back now to let me go back and share the screen. Oh, I have to go back to Yom Kippur real fast. We'll do this more in detail later on. But on Yom Kippur, again, one more proof that the Anan, the Ktoret, has a lot to do with the Anan, and the Anan is a buffer. God tells Moshe Rabbeinu after Bnei Aaron came too close to God and they died, very similar to our Sinai. God tells Moshe, tell Aaron, don't come anytime, whenever you want to the Mikdash, inside the Kodesh Kodeshim, in front of the Kaporet, from the Aaron. But why? Ki be'anan el kaporet. If you want to go and see the kaporet, you need a buffer. You need an anan. And notice the same thing, parochet, kaporet. You can't miss the connection to this bachaktoret. Understand? In other words, if you want to enter, even if I want to enter the Kodesh, I need to bring Ktoret. If I want to enter the Kodesh Kodeshim, even more so, I have to bring Ktoret. I bring in anan. So it says, Ki ba'anan el kaporet. I need. You can only, you can't enter the Kodesh Kodeshim without an Anan. How do you make the Anan? With the Ktoret, as we'll see in a minute. But the same idea is Lifnei Parochet, Apnei Kaporet, is the same wording that we have with the Mishpach Ktoret. And we have the Anan. I think it's a really solid proof that the purpose of the Mishpach Ktoret is to making the Anan, even though it didn't say Anan in Perek Lamed, in Shemot. But I think it's implicit when you see the context. Now, where do you make the Torah from on Yom Kippur? You take a koth from what? From the Mizbech, the Difnei Hashem, and Ktoret in your hand with the two hands. You bait inside the Parochet, and you put the Ktoret in the fire, v'chisa anan ha'ktoret et kaporet, asher yidu v'lo yimut. Isn't that screaming Har Sinai? The Anan, Har Sinai, the Ktoret, and otherwise, remember, you can't see. Then warn the people, then they might look. Therefore, I can enter God's domain, but I need a buffer. I'll call it later. We'll see why I'm calling it protection. Now, the goal of Yom Kippur is not to bring blood. God doesn't need the blood of a goat and the blood of a cow. Rather, we need to do something symbolic in order to end. The goal of Yom Kippur is the Kohen Gadol entering the Kodesh. Bezot Yavron al Kodesh. We want to show God, we're sending our Shliach Tzibor, the Kohen Gadol, to relive Har Sinai. Once a year, the Kohen Gadol representing the nation of Israel is going to relive Moshe Rabbeinu going up to Har Sinai to receive the Luchot. And we're going to do it the day he received the second Luchot. Because the second Luchot come with God's attributes of mercy, which enabled the encounter to continue. Now, and therefore we have to perform this ritual, but the goal was not to bring the blood. I bring the blood in order to enter. The goal of the day is I'm not entering to bring blood. I'm bringing blood in order to enter. I hope that's clear. The goal of Yom Kippur is not giving God blood. God doesn't need our blood. Okay? We need to enter. That's our Shliach Tzibor, our Kohen Gadol. We want to show God, we want to relive Har Sinai. We think we're taking God for our covenantal commitment, and we're remembering that on the day that we received God's attributes of mercy with the second Luchot, which enabled that encounter to be eternal, make it livable. In other words, we're living in a world with tshuva, etc., which is basically what Yom Kippur is going to be about. Therefore, I need to do a ritual to represent that idea. But the goal of the day is not bringing the blood. The goal of the day is entering. But in order to enter, it's a symbolic ritual that gives meaning to the entry, to show God that we're not worthy. And I want to prove now from the next pasuk. Okay, then he takes the dam of the par and puts it where al pnei kaporet. Okay, for the pnei kaporet 7 pamim. Then he takes this ear, and again he does it, the blood outside the parochet, right on the parochet and the kaporet. In other words, we take the blood, we sprinkle it on the kaporet and the parochet. The same two, remember, kaporet, parochet again? And the same thing with the blood of the thing. Now, what's the summary? V'chiper ala kodesh, this kapara is on what we call the kodesh koshim here, Chumash calls the kodesh. Mitumot b'nei Yisrael b'shem l'chol chatotam. For the uncleanliness, we'll talk about what causes tumah later on. And for their sins, for all their sins. And we do the same thing to the Ohel Moed. Why? Hashochen itam b'toch tumatam. I want to make a big deal about that last line, which I think is the key. God is going to dwell with us. The idea of Vayishkon Kvod Hashem Har Sinai, the idea of Shekhinah and Har Sinai go hand in hand. And in theory, God's Shekhinah should not be with the nation who's an Am Kshei Oref, a nation that sins. So in theory, or theologically, whatever you want, or practically speaking, a nation, if God's presence is with the nation, it should not tolerate sin or bad behavior. But God is willing for His Shekhinah to be with us, even though we're not worthy. Remember, even though we're not Ksharafu, that's Moshe's prayer at Har Sinai, in Parshat Kitisa, which we'll get to when we say about Cheteiga. So what I'm getting at is that in order for God, we want to show God, we want Shekhinah to be with us, and to show God we want Shekhinah to be with us, we enter the Mikdash, to the Kodesh Kodeshim, to show we want that relationship. We also want to show God we're not worthy of that relationship, because He's Shochen itam b'toch tumatam, even though we're Tameh. And in theory, someone Tameh shouldn't be able to enter. What enables us to enter is the symbolic act of bringing the Ktoret. So basically, Ktoret is basically an entry, a sort of like a pass, enables entry, but it's showing God on the one hand that we want to be close, but we're not worthy of that thing. It's like sort of, I guess, called a paradox, where in theory, we're not worthy of being close to God, because we're not Kshei Oref. But what makes us worthy of that relationship with God? Our recognition we're not so worthy. Now, how do we show God we're not so worthy? By showing God we need protection. That's the fact I'm going in with a protective cover. We'll see in a minute why the word kaporet, why the word kapara relates to protection soon. But showing God I'm entering, but showing God I need protection to enter, and I really don't deserve to enter, but He's letting me in anyhow. I think that's the meaning of the Ktoret and the Anan. Okay, any questions still here? Yeah, Ruth?
Yeah. So just to make it a little easier, and from my mind, the dam of the chatat is the hakara. It's the recognition that we have sinned. So we want to come in. We need the firewall of the ketoret, but we come in with an acknowledgement that we have sinned. That's the
Yeah.
dam. We bring the dam of the chatat in to say, yeah, we are not worthy. The dam is the recognition of our unworthiness, and the kapor and excuse me, and the ketoret is the firewall that allows
The
us.
two center. Now, why would the nation, why would you bring the main animal bringing are seirim, aren't there? The two seirim? The chatat of Am Yisrael is a seir. The dam seir is what Am
Right.
Yisrael brings.
And the power,
Yeah.
it's
The
Aaron.
part from the Kohen. Now, what story in Chumash tells us that the dam of the seir is communal sin?
Oh,
It's
that's,
Yosef and his brothers.
well, yeah, Yosef.
And that's why in Sefer Yom Yom Kippur was the day that the brothers sold Yosef, which is awesome. Whether it's historically correct or not is irrelevant, but they're onto something big. In fact, they give that's the reason in their calendar, in Sefer Yofelim, in the Book of Jubilees, that's the reason for, they go through all the dates and all through things. So that's what happened on the brothers sold Yosef at Yom Kippur in the Book of Jubilees. The the piyut we have in Yom Kippur of Aseret Harugim Malchut is based on the same idea. Remember? The piyut we do with the 10 martyrs, it starts with Yosef and his brothers. And
We could go back a little further. The the goat,
it
well,
goes back to Yehuda with Yehuda and Tamar.
even further back, Yaakov and Esav.
Wait, the fact he brings him a goat for a present, Ulai Chapra Panav.
Deception story. No, he uses the skin.
Oh, with the goat. Yeah, that's goats
And
and
there are
goats.
two goats.
Yeah, that's I think
Says,
David
bring
Foreman.
me two goats.
Yeah, I think David Foreman's got a whole thing on that. He calls it goats and coats or something like that. Yeah, goats and coats. I'm pretty sure it's one of his books. I remember like years ago. It was really good. Now the so again that idea, and that's why the idea of a buffered encounter I think is so important. Now, to prove it now, I want to take the concept, we'll trace the concept of kapara and chumash, and as usual, the first time it's mentioned is always key. And because without reminding for the 10th time, there's so many parallels between the flood story and Har Sinai. Remember 40 days and 40 nights, and Matzachem B'nei Hashem, and not be careful everyone else and make you the only one. And what do you call it? The idea of a teva. There's so many of them. Now, in the flood story, what's going to save Noach, who's Matzachem B'nei Hashem? It's like Moshe was Matzachem B'nei Hashem. What's going to save him is the teva. But what's going to save the teva? It's waterproofing, and therefore aseh teva tatzeh gofer kinim taseh teva. But what's going to keep it afloat from sinking? V'chavarto tov b'baitim b'chutz b'kofer. We're going to coat it with the pitch. We're going to coat it with the waterproofing will be made with kofer. But the word is usually tit gefen. Like there's different words for it. This word is rarely ever used. But the fact that we use the verb and noun kofer for the protective cover of the teva is just awesome, because we see the teva is protecting Noach and nature and all the animals in the teva. So kapara enables us to exist God's wrath, the punishment of the flood. We exist up. So I think that's a giveaway in the beginning that kapara relates to protection from not just from Shekhinah, but from God's wrath and God's punishment. Now, another proof that kapara is protection from punishment or from danger. Yaakov, you mentioned Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov is returning. He thinks Esav wants to kill him. Whether he is or not, that's a different question. But he sends a present. The Ram remember he davens, he sends a present, tries to make a peace deal, etc. And he says, and he tells his brother, "Listen, I'm going to teach you a lesson. No one messes with me." No, I'm sorry, that was his kids. What's Yaakov say? He tries to make peace. This Kamar Ulai achapra panav. See the word kapara. I'm gonna try to sort of protect myself from his anger with this mincha. If I send him a nice present, maybe he'll be nice to me, and then I can see his face. Ulai yisapanai. So it's assuming he wants to kill me. Maybe this will protect me from his anger. Now, later we'll see Ulai bachlu. These are going through times in Chumash. We don't have time to do these today, but this is already in Sefer Shemot. We'll get to Perach Chavtet. But this will be key because I'm going to disagree with Ruth for a minute. Because Ruth was saying, I need to bring kapara because we've sinned. I want to claim almost the opposite. We need to bring kapara because we might sin. You understand the difference? And the difference is, do you need Yom Kippur before you've sinned? Understand? The people, is Yom Kippur preparation for this coming year, or atonement for or using the word atonement for last year? In other words, do I need a yearly cleansing because I did something wrong, or do you need a yearly cleansing because I might do something wrong? Like when you waterproof your shoes, remember the old days you would put silicone in your boots so they wouldn't get ruined in the water. So is kapara atonement for what I did wrong last year, or is kapara preparation and readiness for new year of encountering God?
Both.
Of course, it'd be both. It's like, what's the simanach on Kol Nidre? Yom Kippur shavar Yom Kippurim zeh, Yom Kippurim zeh, Yom Kippurim haba. Which Chazonim love to make a big deal about.
If you only use it of the, prospective, then you begin to sound a lot like Eov, like prophylactic. That's, not so good.
I mean, but you're going between employee consumer again, because Eov wants to be a good, he doesn't want to get, he's protecting himself from as a consumer, not as an employee. Avram's the employee, in case you follow but that's a class in Eov. Now, the this parchatat we did for this Kippurim we see later on in Parakeh. Then this is what I'm getting at, and on the 7 days of Miluim, what requires kapara is the mizbeach, not just the kohanim. The mizbeach requires kapara during the 7 days of Miluim. The mizbeach hachitzon. It didn't do anything wrong. And there's the idea of kapara as a startup before I'm doing anything. The idea that everything in the Mikdash needs kapara before we start, as a startup for something, I think that's going to be key. And therefore, I'm going to view Yom Kippur not as because we did something wrong last year, but because we might be doing something wrong. But the second God reaches the conclusion we're an Am Oref, we're bound to make mistakes. It's bound to happen. And therefore, because we're bound to make mistakes, I need the best way to prevent that is recognizing I might make a mistake, but recognizing God is willing to accept me with the fact that I tend to make mistakes, but He's willing to forgive me and give me a chance to learn from my mistakes, which is the whole theme of davening on Yom Kippur, basically. There's the fact you can learn. If I did something wrong last year, God can forgive me, but not technically. By showing God I know what I did wrong, I can learn from my mistake and do better. That's tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah. Remember, bring the Torah gzera. So the actions we're doing, the ritual we're doing on Yom Kippur, is going to have a transformative effect on our behavior. It's not something, it's some magical, mystical, give this blood and you get a clean slate. It's quite the opposite. It's do something symbolic to remember that God can forgive you, but you have to be worthy of His forgiveness. And you're thanking God for this new covenant that has attributes of mercy. Now, if you didn't catch on, that whole theme of kapara goes right to Chet HaEgel. The whole theme of Midat Hadin and Midat Rachamim. So that's going to take us more towards the Mishkan being after Chet HaEgel, but again, we'll get to that later on. Now, and my proof for that point is Shibat Yamim Tchaper al Mizbeach, okay? Vayam Mizbeach Kodesh Kodeshim. As you need kapara on the Mizbeach. Again, the Mizbeach did nothing wrong, but the fact it part of the 7-day Miluim ceremony is making the Kohanim, it's inaugurating the Mikdash. Now, and therefore, what we had in today's in Mizbach Torah in chapter 30, we just read, the Mizbach Torah needs once a year kapara to prepare for the upcoming year. In other words, the kapara on the Mizbach Torah, what I want to claim is Echad B'Shana I need to get it ready for the upcoming year. So just like the Mizbach HaOlah needed kapara during the 7 days of Miluim the first time around, the Mizbach Torah needs kapara once a year for all generations. Okay. Now, I bring one more example of protection. We're going to run out of time. So let me do something really fast. We'll get this later on. So we had the word kaporet. We talked about this briefly. On the kapara, you put the aron on top, and the aron you put the edut, and And then God's going to speak to from the kapor, but the kapor is the cover of the thing, but it has kruvim on top. Now, the idea of kruvim we have in Gan Eden, remember, man unworthy of God being in God's presence is sent away. And what protects Gan Eden from a non-worthy man entering? The kruvim and this fire restored. But again, God doesn't put up a wall; He puts up guards, and kruvim allow selective entry. That's why it's a chevra mitapechet. So, like in Buckingham Palace, you can't enter, but I know Diane's gone. Oh, she can't come. Henry can't. Whatever is there. Harry can't come in either. But what's her name can come? Not Megan.
William.
Catherine,
William,
William, and Catherine or Kate, whatever.
Charles, yeah.
They can enter. That was. I need a guard for selective entry. Only someone worthy of entering can come in. So lahavdil elef havdalot. The idea of kruvim means it's showing you that behind these kruvim, they're protecting the place of the Shekhinah. Now, again, then this is what we started this discussion. In what way does it relate to the events of Har Sinai, and how much it relates to the sins of the golden calf? And then why do we need 7 days of Kippur and 7 days of Miluim if we did nothing wrong? Okay, now, quickly, we have to do this real fast, but we'll do this next week properly. After Mizbach Toret, the Dibur is over. We have one after the next short Diburim afterwards. So it's the Mishkan topic's not over yet. We have the Machzit Shekel right afterwards, but its own Dibur. I made a big deal about the Dibur. Then we have the Kior, its own Dibur, another Dibur. And we have the Shemen HaMishcha with its own Dibur, how to make the Shemen HaMishcha. We mentioned before that we need it, but now we what do you call it? In chapter 29, we say we need the Shemen HaMishcha to anoint the Kohanim during the 7 days of Miluim. We don't know how to make it yet. Now we have a footnote. Here's how to make it. Its own Dibur. Another Dibur, how to make the Torah itself that we're going to bring every day. Bitamak Torah, okay? Then we have another Dibur, who the builder is going to be. And the last Dibur is Shabbat, that even though building the Mishkan is so important, you can't work on Saturday, double, triple pay, etc. But it's Mishkan, the Kedusha of Shabbat overrides the Kedusha of building the Mishkan. That's all topic for thing. And then we get to the story of Chet HaEgel. Now, if you count them up, that's 1, 2, I think we did this before, 3, 4, 5, 6 times God speaks. So if I make this whole Mishkan unit, there's one massive Dibur. Truba Tetzaveh, chapters 29 through the middle of 30, 25 to the middle of 30. One really long Dibur with the Shekhinah in the beginning and end. And then I have at the very end Mizbach Torah in the first Dibur. And then I have another Dibur. Machzit Shekel, that's Dibur number 2. Kior Dibur number 3. Shemen HaMishcha Dibur number 4. Tiktor Tzaf Dibur number 5. Betzal the Builder number 6. And number 7, surprise, surprise, the laws of Shabbat. That can't be, of course. Remember I told you the Mishkan is also a reflection of creation. Olat Tamid Baboker, Ba'erev, etc. Ba'erev Boker. We'll talk about the which animals we're bringing and why solet, all the different, why we're showing off our bread. We'll deal with that another share. But the fact that there's 7 diburs, one long one, and 6 short ones, and the 7th one being Shabbat, is and just as neat as the 6th one is about man, fulfilling God's command. Remember, God commanded and God did, and now God commands and we do, because we become a partner with God in creation. We're B'Tselem Elokim. So all this goes back to the theme of the Mishkan reminding us that we're in God's image. I'm going to run out of time now. But all these leftovers, this is really a whole shir. I'll just do a 2-minute version. We'll go back next week. If I make a list of the leftovers in the Mishkan, they're over here. We have the Mizbach Torah was outside the unit. See this little table here? The Machzit Shekel. Let me get a little marker here. Is that it? No, that's not going to. A highlighter. That's good. A highlighter. That's not going to highlight. A better color. Erase. You can't erase. Forget it. Color. Green. That's better. Okay. So we have the Mizbach Torah, the first. The Machzit Shekel. And we have the Kior, Shemen HaMishcha, and the Ktor Tamid, the Ktor on top. That's in chapter 30. Now, they all seem very random, but they complete the Shekhinah unit. Why? It's like really cool. Because if I follow the Shekhinah unit, what do we have? We have the Aron Kapar Kruvim, the Kelim inside the Mishkan. That's where the Torah belongs. Then we have the Ol Moed. Now the Machzit Shekel, we use the silver for the Adanim, the sockets to hold up the Krashim. So the Krashim The machzit shekel is the silver, and the silver makes the krashim for the to hold up the Mishkan, the holds of the Omoed. The kior is in the goes with the Zbach Olah and the Chatzer. The Shemen and Mishcha is used for the big day Kuna and the 7 days of Milum that makes them Kohanim. And just like there's Ktoret, there's a Korban Tamid on this Mizbeach, there's Ktoret Tamid on this Mizbeach. Got that? So it's a beautiful parallel unit. So I call this the Ktoret unit, which complements with an E, the Shechina unit. Now, what did all these have in common? They're all protective. It's Mizbach Torah is protecting us from the entering. We'll see Machzit HaShekel has the word, we'll see the word kapara like crazy in Machzit HaShekel. The kior is enables you to use the Mizbeach. I don't do an avodat tamid on the kior. The kior is there so when I go to the Mizbeach, I don't die. Remember? Shemen and Mishcha will be. It's going to anoint the Kohanim, but it's going to help prepare them for their job. And the Ktoret Tamid, again, goes together with Mizbach Ktoret, closes the unit. So I'm saying this whole leftover unit, even though they're left over and they're outside the Shechina unit, they're all relate to protection and preparation for encountering God. Remember Har Sinai, we had a wash, B'kidashtem yom machar. So before we meet God, we have to go to the Kior. Shemen and Mishcha, we'll have to talk about Yaakov's dream, how Shemen and Mishcha relates to that, and Yaakov's dream of building a house for God. And the Ktoret for sure goes with the Mizbach Ktoret, just like the Korban Tamid goes on the Mizbach Olah. Got it? So that's going to be the parallel for, it's going to make the whole thing parallel. I'm out of time, but all these extras I'm getting at is that there's a Shechina unit and there's a Ktoret unit. And they fill up, they explains why they're out of order, they're outside the unit. Now, when Bezalel puts it together in Vayikapude, they'll be in building order. And we don't have this crazy, Shechina unit, not Shechina unit. You just build it in logical order. First you build the tent, then you put the kelim, and then you Torah's back with the menorah and shulchan, etc., and everything's back to normal. What didn't we do yet today? We didn't do, okay. The need for preparation, that's the idea of preparation for encountering the Shekhinah is right out of Har Sinai, especially if you want to see God directly. You need 3 days of preparation and washing your hands and washing your clothes, etc. And then we'll talk about another shir, how Shemen and Mishcha relates to Yaakov's dream and the whole concept of the house for God and its purpose. Which will take us to the idea of are we coming again as consumers or as employees? That's going to be our bottom line conclusion. I want to show you how all this whole discussion will give a totally different outlook of what it means to go to shul. To God. Let me take questions. Let me turn off the share. Okay, we covered a lot of material today, but I wanted to get straight this idea of why the Mizbach Torah, I think, is outside the Shechina unit, but it represents the idea that we need a buffer encounter with God, and the idea of a buffer encounter exists even before Chatei. Yeah, Akshay, you had a question?
I'm very uneasy with your use of the word protection and your buffer, the idea of buffer per se. A buffer, I mean, I understand the Kofer in Tevat Noach protected in the sense, didn't protect, it sealed. It kept the water out. You're not keeping something out.
You stop. Yeah, the question is the goal keeping water out or is the goal not sinking?
It's
the goal is keeping water out. The goal is not to sink because you needed water inside to drink.
Yeah, but the water, well, it's probably seawater. So who says that you can drink it?
Okay, that's why they had other water inside. But
sure.
Miriam had a bear inside the table.
The problem is like I don't understand the concept of protecting the Shechina. The symbol of the Shechina is that Shechina is inside the Kodesh HaKodashim. Moshe goes into there, to speak with Hashem. Afterwards, the Kohen Gadol is going to go into there once a year.
Mhm.
What's he doing in there once a year? What is his purpose for going in there once a year?
So that's why we need Yaakov's dream. Because the goal of the shchit, it's not God in a cage. Right? No, it's the Shekhinah in the Kodesh Kodashim is to emanate, which is represented by the menorah. Understand? The menorah and the Aron are very similar in their description. And the Aron goes with the menorah, and the kapar, we'll see that it goes with the shulchan. But the menorah, I'm sorry, the kruvim, I'm sorry, go with the menorah, mikshah zahav.
But
The,
what do
the
you mean
my,
by
my idea
goal
is that
Torah is to
if the
emanate?
if the goal of the mikdash is not God in a cage, but God emanating from the Mishkan. In other words, I need a connection between God from heaven to earth. That'd be Yaakov's dream. And then Ufrat Siyam all four directions. Again, we'll do this share on Yaakov's dream and see how it relates to Beit Elokim. It's a totally different concept of temple as opposed to other religions. It's not God in a temple. It's God. We need a temple for God to emanate.
I agree, because throughout the Tanakh, what happens all of the time, Bnei Israel, when they go off the derech and they turn to other gods, what is it that they're always doing? They're bringing their Ktoret. They're bringing the Ktoret to the other gods. It always mentions that. It's always what they're talking about. It's isn't it with the discussion with Eliyahu when the people say, well, when we didn't bring the Ktoret to these other gods, we had lousy crops. When we started bringing the Ktoret to the other gods, we had good crops.
Yeah.
That
But
whole
listen, but they say la haktir. I'm not sure they don't say ktoret. They say la haktir. Haktara is also the olah. The word haktara is anything on a mizbeach. Haktara is not unique to ktoret. Haktara, all sacrifices are called haktara. There's haktara to olah, and Elio and Har Sinai of Day Baal are bringing an olah. They're bringing cow. They're bringing parim. They're not bringing ktoret.
all right, I don't know. I have to go
Anyway,
back.
we'll discuss it.
Your
Everyone check.
knowledge of the text is much better than mine, but
Okay.
my impression when I read those psukim, those stories, was that they were specifically bringing some kind of Ktoret. That
Okay, so
was
we'll have to look at them. The third guy is going to be Uziel bringing it to God, but not being commanded. That's Asher Lo Tziva. I said, wait, Trumat Hadeshen, okay, the lamps of the menorah, okay? Is the purpose, and let me see Bobby's question, is atonement for the purpose of the future mistakes? Yeah, that's what we're going to get at. In my opinion, the kapara is because we're bound to make mistakes in the upcoming year. That's Asher, and we did, it's not, it also goes to last year, but also prepares us for next year. Okay, what about the guy who cleaned the inside of the Kodesh didn't need protection? That's a great question about the cleaning crew. How he goes in. They goes in with a box. The Gemara talks about that.
What about Moshe Rabbeinu when he had to go in and speak to Hashem and Hashem called him? Do you have to bother bringing Torah?
No, Moshe was different. But when Moshe comes down, he needs a mask later on when he talks to the people.
Right,
Now,
right. So he
when
did.
does he need the mask talking to God, talking to people? That's really complicated. But that's the result of Chet Ego.
Moshe's panim el
But
panim.
panim b'fanim, there's no anan there. No, there's no anan. Moshe doesn't need anan because Moshe is Moshe Rabbeinu. Because he didn't hit the rock yet. No, he was still okay there in his early years. But now Moshe doesn't need the buffer, but Am Yisrael does. That's why how much this buffer is necessary because of Chet Egel. I want to appreciate both opinions. Again, what Asher, you're going more to opinion that Torah is representing God more than protecting from God. A lot of people say that. Don't feel bad. It's a legitimate approach for sure. I just the by the way, frost is called kfor, isn't it? I should have brought that. Kfor, daka kfor ala aretz, the man. Kfor in Hebrew. Kaf pei vav resh. Kfor is frost. You mumble in Zimra. Kfor kefer yafazer.
Brown.
What's frost do? It covers the ground. It's a covering. It's a protective cover.
is it possible that not so much the chait, but the Torah enables the imperfect to encounter the perfect? Man, by his very nature, yes, sins, but is also imperfect, and God, by his very nature, is perfect. So that the concept of Ketoret is that which is buffer or enabling the imperfect and the real world
I
to
think what
encounter.
supports what you're saying is that shochini tam b'toch tumatam. That's what if it's even though we're tamei, God's willing to dwell with us, but we need to show God. We recognize that. We're showing God our appreciation that even though we're not worthy of this encounter, He allows us to have the encounter anyhow. Okay. Anyway, that's an idea. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that's why I want to share that idea with you. It'll help us develop what we're going to do next to appreciate the connection between the Mishkan and Chet Egel. I want to show you that you need it for both. The idea but I also tried to establish that you can't miss the connection between not just Har Sinai and creation, but Har Sinai and Revelation. I mean, the Mishkan and Revelation, as well as Har Sinai, the Mishkan and creation. And creation and Revelation go hand in hand. Now, to appreciate that much better, which we didn't get to last week, I have to do it probably next week. This Baiti Lechem Elohim goes back to Breshit. Uh, Probably next week we have to see how Sefer Breshit is the background for all this. Because we have the story of creation. We have the story of creation, of course, in Breshit, in the flood story. We have Yaakov's dream in Breshit. We have, what else we have in, you just mentioned something else in Breshit. Yaakov's dream. There's one other thing. There's a lot of things. Oh, and Brit Milah, we'll see. Because Brit Milah relates to Yaakov's dream as well. What's this idea of Lo L'Chad Elohim? So that idea, again, it's going to all relate to the idea of we're coming to God as employees, not as consumers. That'll be, I'll try to support that next week as well. Okay. Anyway, everyone have a good week. And hopefully, we're hoping for good news this week. But your president will surprise us again with a miracle, but we'll see what happens. Okay. Anyway, thank you, everybody, and have a good week.